And here's Jason.
Yay.
Hi, everyone. Just in the middle of choreography here, getting everybody situated. So happy to be here today, especially with this new pairing. I'm so excited to have Beverly back, which is not really back, it's ongoing for about, I don't know, I say 8, 9, and Beverly always says it's more than that, months. And Jason's been a regular guest on shows with Dave and Kelly. So it's nice to kind of share the wealth and get everybody to get to know each other. And that's one of the really quality opportunities working that you can, and also the ability to get to know people in ways that you wouldn't have any other way. The word of the day is conflict. Welcome everybody in the audience to share their thoughts and suggestions that we could become more relevant today through quality comment. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Beverly, and Beverly could give us a little bit of update on Beverly and initial thoughts on conflict.
The initial thoughts on conflict. Well, we're always in conflict, right? It's like we wake up in the morning and what challenges are we going to have today? You know, and it's a great conversation, and I'm so glad that I'm with you. By the way, Jason, because you're a conflict expert for sure. And if anybody doesn't know me from Tuesdays, just to be sure that you do, I help high performing women navigate the stress of business, family, and relationships. You can find me on reinventimpossible.com, but it's all the conflict that we have daily between our business, between our family, between our relationship. What goes on there? We're conflicted. We're often fighting. When we fight, we go into flight. And I'm not going to go into fighting right now because, once again, Jason, you're the expert here. And Jason has been in the military. I know Jason, he's part of our team, and which is really great because what Dawn has, and as you've been probably noticing if you listen to Dawn, used to be 5 times a week. Now it's actually 7 days a week. Now we're down to 4. But you will see Jason, you see myself, you see Kelly, and we also welcome another guest. So if you're eager, by all means, give Dawn, just, go on the DM, find out what's going on, express yourself, and you can be on with us because it's all about conversation. It's all about connecting. It's all about helping people because this is what we do with these conversations. So I'm going to, by the way, we welcome all the comments, and I see them now from Carrie and from other people coming in, and we welcome these comments. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, please, we welcome that too. And Jason, I'm interested to hear all kinds of wonderful stuff that you have to say.
No, but no pressure. No, don't worry
No
about
pressure.
it. Yeah, it's great. It's great to join you, and thank you for inviting me today. And I really, really appreciate it. You talk about my mentor said, I'll start with this. You either have conflict or you have synergy. And keep in mind that an example that he used that I'll use now is that 1 + 1 isn't always 2. If you add 1 gallon of water and 1 gallon of ethanol, that will not give you 2 gallons of liquid. Believe it or not, look it up. There's a lot of different things. Or if you take, 1 cup of sand and 1 cup of marbles, that won't give you 2 cups. So there's balance, and there's in there, and that's what this community is about synergy. And when we don't like conflict, and it's not that you shy away from it, but it's that it's not called for, and you're not getting the results that you want. So that's the beauty of this. And you can suss out really fast. Dawn sometimes will invite me, and whether my schedule's off or something, I'll say, as long as I can add value and you feel it's okay, let me know, and I'll join, and I would love to join. And I think that's the key about not having conflict, is that if you add value to something and you grow something and it's better, I'm really interested to see where this conversation goes. And yes, I do deal with emotions, and conflict can bring up a lot of emotions, and helping people see it. And I know Beverly, you talk a lot about mindset, and that's really that plays into this too. So I'm excited to see this conversation where it goes today, and just happy to be here with you.
Well, thank you both for such a great launch of a quality show that we plan on having for the next hour. And, when I see conflict, I see opportunity, because conflict is usually reached when you get to an obstacle or some form of resistance that you have to adjust. When everything's going smooth, you just kind of go with the flow. But all of a sudden, something's in your way or someone's in your way. How do you deal with it? And how do you deal with it in a positive way where both parties can benefit and learn from it to avoid conflict or minimize conflict? Because what you want is to resonate and to project inclusion and involvement as opposed to resistance and obstacles. And some people create the conflict, not just deal with it. Some people are the cause of the conflict. Why? Because usually they don't take into consideration other people's situation, other people's needs. Why is a big question, not so much what. And I think that's where communication can come in to really deal with conflict, is because most conflict is a lot of assumption, presumption. Someone did something and you interpret it in a way, but you're not really sure that's the way they meant it to be. And the only way to know is to ask. I heard something that's not very positive, or it sounds kind of negative. Can you elaborate? And a lot of people aren't even aware that they're creating conflict. That's just their normal way of doing things. And when someone brings it to their attention, you give them a chance to justify it or not. And then at least you know who and what you're dealing with. So it's a learning experience. It's a growing experience. Again, everything in life can be looked at in a positive way or a negative way. And how do you want to go through life and go through work even uh, with resistance or with resonance? Those are key elements. So, Beverly, I consider you the expert on being the expert on this. So, what have you for us?
Well, we always go into conflict resolution. And that's what I think you were talking about, really, Jason. We are always in conflict with one thing or another. Some is greater conflict, some is lesser conflict, but whatever it is, we feel it, and we should feel it. If we don't feel it, what we do is we build resistance, and it keeps on mounting. And once it keeps on mounting, it goes into anger. And then you really have a conflict, and you really have aggression, and people back off or they challenge you. So the first thing to do is to read how you feel. And a great example is what you just gave us, Jason, which was, can I help? Will I give value? Do I have time? Do I have time to do it? Otherwise, we will add additional stress, and that will give us internal conflict. And that will add up, because that pressure is going to go to your family, to your friends, to everybody else, because you're under stress. So to read what you want and what you have. So sometimes you'd like to do it, but can I do it? Should I do it? So balance is really what it's all about. And I go back to that on listening. We want to react. As soon as there's a conflict, we will jump right in. And that's particularly a guy thing, isn't it, Jason? It's like, I don't like that.
Right.
And then, I'm ready. I have my armor on. I'll fight you, But the idea is to listen. And when you listen, you're going to get so much more out of it than to do the talking. Just remember, when you're talking, you're not listening, right? You're really not. So if you listen and ask the questions, you can resolve a conflict. And that would be with your children, that would be with your friends, that can be in business, that can be anywhere. When somebody is going to more or less attack you, This isn't right. You did that wrong, etc., etc. What you want to do immediately is jump right in and justify, and they don't want to hear that. What they want to do is to get to be able to express themselves and tell you what they really want out of you. They don't want to listen to your story. They have their own story. So what you're doing if somebody's in a conflict is allow them to express it all. And you really sometimes have to knuckle up, because you don't want to hear this stuff and you want to explain. You always have a reason. But if somebody doesn't want to hear the reason, they're not interested, and it'll go into more and more drama. And then it can not resolve. It can end up really being nasty, and that's unnecessary. So the first thing when somebody is conflicted with you or you have an argument or anything that you feel that you should settle is to listen to their side. And then when they're ready to hear it, and you can ask them, would you like me to explain? Do you want to know the reason for that? Well, then they can become on your team. And then they can say, yeah, I wonder why you did that. Why did that happen? When they're asking why, they're going to listen to your explanation. And when they listen to your explanation, you can have a meeting of the minds. And when you do, you can resolve a conflict. And both of you can feel that you're the winner. And that's the game, isn't it? We all want to win. But we don't win when we have a war and we're out fighting. Oh, unless you're in a battle. I go back to your military experience there. And that's a whole other thing. But in our reality, that's not the way it works. What we want is reciprocation, continuous reciprocation. Friends, each of us want to be liked. So, Jason.
Well said. Jason.
And just to touch back, to go backwards for a second, to go forwards, talking about the military, that's a point that I wrote, I jotted a note down, because what you see is a lot of folks that get out of the military, they're used to conflict and resolution. They're used to, there's a problem and I fix it and I move forward, so they have that mindset, and they get out, and this isn't a show about that, but you get out and your values have to change and you're in a new world and just things are different. So a lot of people will get out of the military and they will create conflict in order to fix something because they're comfortable there. They realize it. They're like, no, I can problem solve this. Not realizing, but you created the problem. So their actions lead to conflict. And it gives them their identity back. It gives them the ability to actually do something, because maybe they're not finding a job, maybe they don't know what they want to do, maybe their family's like, I don't know who you are. So by creating the conflict, they can then solve the conflict, and you can see that's a slippery slope, because then it just goes where you live in conflict. But something that you said reminded me, I just this weekend in the spiritual center I go to, they quoted Viktor Frankl, and it reminded me of that, where, I won't say the whole quote, but basically between stimulus and response, there's that moment. And that is where you make that decision. And to what you were talking about, Beverly, about you decide how you're going to react. You can take it personal. Part of the issue is that we're so ingrained in, I am Jason, and this is how Jason reacts, and this is what Jason thinks, and then you have to defend that and support that. So that's what leads to conflict, is that you like, well, no, I have to defend that. I don't care what you're saying. It's not what I'm saying. So there's a problem. So now I'm going to get my shackles up, or up. But the reality is, I love what you said, is listen, is pause, listen. For what purpose? Why is this person saying this? What could they mean? What are they trying to communicate to me? I tell people all the time, relationships matter. So some people will ask me, just in my personal life, not professional, but will ask me, well, what should I do about this? And what should I say? And it work related sometimes. And I'll say, well, relationships matter. It depends on the relationship you have with this person, what you can say, how you can say it, how you can approach this. Do you have to go really soft because that relationship isn't that strong? Or can you just come in and say, hey, stop that? That's not right, because someone like in our family, right? With family, you can just, and there's a conflict, you can usually just say, come on, man, That's ridiculous. You know, and you could be upfront about it. So you have to judge that, and you have to own what you own. You know, I just had a good friend of mine and a connection through LinkedIn that I've known for years, and I really respect him. He reached out to me and was like, he made a comment about, I posted an event, and he made a comment about changing the photo that I put with it, just out of the blue. And I was like, at first, I was like, what are you talking about? You know, and I said, no, he's trying to be helpful. Regardless of how I felt about that comment and and the reality of is that did I think it was right or not because I chose it, but I said, well, you know what? He is trying to help you. And I said, thank you. Thank you for the great comment, the feedback. I love it. I appreciate it. And that was it. And then, you know, our relationship is fine. But if I went into conflict, what are you talking about? Why do you say this? Well, I did this because same result, you know? So really, I love what you said. Listen, think, focus, and then make a decision.
Yeah, these are excellent points, and so many quality takeaways one can receive from this. You know, the biggest conflict that you deal with is the conflict within yourself, because that's ongoing. You know, do I wear this or do I wear that? Do I go here? How long do I stay? Everything is a measured uh, reaction or response to something. And then what triggers you? Why does something create resistance and frustration when it's still words, it's still deeds, but it's what you allow to enter into your mindset. Some people can give you the worst criticism, but they mean it looks like we're freezing up.
You're back.
You know, and that's all to do with technology. But you know what's fascinating is you have control over your environment. You have control over your communication. And a lot of times, I know, you know, when I was in the retail, and I mentioned this a lot, I'd have an irate customer, and I found the slower and the lower I talked, the slower and the lower they would talk. You know, so if you meet somebody's energy, you're going to extend beyond where you need to be. And most times you want to mitigate the conflict, not enhance it or let it go to become more of a long-term situation. And with that, I can't not recognize our great audience here. Kerry's here with his first joke. What does nuclear radiation specialists have for TV dinner? Fissions, chips. Well, that's something I guess only a nuclear physicist would really appreciate as much. But thank you for the joke. Uh, Great, happy to be here, and I'm so honored and happy to see Harvey Tuck here. Harvey
Yeah.
is not a rising star, but a shooting star, someone we admire and appreciate, and is the opposite of conflict, which is cooperation, which is collaboration, which is two pieces by themselves not being whole coming together to make a whole. Harvey's got a show that follows this on Tuesdays, the franchise show, which is the number one show in its category. Also has the franchise brand story show on Thursdays, doing some phenomenal things, and a valued cohort to our group and a great contributor. So thank you, Harvey. And then comes back with You Are Right, Beverley, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that order. And most people in any conflict. You know, and I'm always a big fan of buying some vowels before you solve the puzzle. Because why not learn a little bit more before you hit the button that you may not be able to take back? Like they say, it's impossible to unring a bell. And things that are said are remembered, and for good reason, and maybe not. So why not be remembered for the best you can? How do you leave someone? Not how do you begin with someone? You know, you can begin with conflict and frustration, but how did you resolve it? How did you make someone better for the experience? And how did you feel better? Because wherever you go, you take that with you, and it continues to the next person. And then how are you at criticism? You know, like Jason just mentioned, I appreciate someone seeing something and taking the time to see it. Now, the key is why. And that comes down to intention. Is what would they have to gain or benefit from doing this? And hopefully it's altruistic, and it's also how it's given. Tone of voice makes a difference.
Yeah.
Is it sarcastic? Is it believable? And all these things are going through your mind so quickly that you don't have time to always figure it out. And that's why sometimes in a conflict, you might want to pause and say, hey, this is a lot to deal with right now. Let me digest it tonight. Let's get back in a day or two. And it keeps you fresh and objective, because how many times have you said, boy, I wish I would have just said, let me think it over, instead of agreeing to it, right? Because sometimes people are just light, or they go with the flow and they find out, geez, I got to go somewhere I don't want to go. I shouldn't have to go, but it was my responsibility not to commit myself to it. So, anyways, there's so much to so much. And because of that, it's Beverly's turn.
Now, as you were talking about a lot of things, the thought came to mind is the conflict that we always have within us, regardless. And that is forever present. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I anything enough? That kind of stuff. And we can be competitive with other people, but we can also be competitive with ourselves, meaning I should be better than this. And that becomes an inner conflict all the time. And I love stories, as everybody knows. I mean, I listen to them all the time from other people, and we try to change mindset, et cetera, et cetera. But also, what I love so much about people is how they overcome challenges. And when you have a challenge, it's your inner conflict that is like, what can I do? How do I get out of it? How do I get better? How can I? Doesn't matter what it is, it's all within. And I'm thinking of the story. It's on my podcast, but that's what I was thinking of, Don, when you were talking. This was a woman who was a child at the time, and they defected from Russia. It was Russia at the time, and came to America, and she was in the camps, et cetera, and came to America. And of course, the pressure on this child to not only learn English, which, she did, but to exceed and excel because of what her parents had gone through for her benefit to come. And what she did is she was tops of her class. She had put all that internal pressure upon herself in technology. What she also did was she formed her own company. She became really on top of her game, traveling all over the world. And what happened to her also was the pressures that happened to us. It's internalized. And yes, she wanted to have a family as well. And she did. So the pressures of being a good mom, and the pressures of running a huge company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, what happened also, she found that she was gaining 80 pounds in this entire adventure. And as you know, the first thing you do is you try to lose weight. You go on that level instead of really going, saying, hey, what's going on here? Is it really about the weight? Okay. That's the conflict. Okay. And with her, something had to give. She ended up in the emergency, all kinds of problems where it was stress related, not weight related. Weight didn't help, but the stress. Now we're going back to conflict. The conflict that she had is, well, what do I do? I can't stop what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing, and I really do. And I love my family, and I love everything. And this is what I know. And I would feel so guilty if I didn't do all this because my parents are so proud. That's the internal conflict. But the body is saying, stop. And so when you reach a point, and in this point, it was critical. You have to make a change. And that's what conflict does when you reach a point. It's not always a bad thing. And I was thinking of what you were saying, Dawn, in the very beginning. Conflict means something has to change. It doesn't have to be so huge. But I'm giving her it as an example because the inner conflict is what put her in such a fast lane. She didn't have to do what she was doing, but she was overachieving, overcompensating. And it was never good enough. And that was the inner conflict until the body said, it's enough. And then the conflict is, but how can I stop? Until you have to stop. And what it was the universe said, you had better stop. And then she got into health. And now, of course, she has a spa and a whole business going along with that. But that's a whole other story. She's never been happier. But what happens is you find a way through conflict. You don't have to look at it as such a negative thing. You can figure things out. You can get help. There are people. You can find other resources. You don't have to push yourself to such an extreme and feel I'm the only person out there in the universe that's suffering like this. And frankly, Dawn, I see it all the time. I mean, somebody even called me today. Unfortunately, it seems to be a lot of people in the tech industry. I'm going back to that. Okay. Because the pressure is enormous. And how do you navigate all the different stressors and yourself who has come out of school and loved this stuff and only want this is what I wanted in my life, and now that I've got it, now what? Okay, so conflict is within and we have to recognize that.
Terrific share, Beverly. Jason?
So many good points, so much goodness there. And yeah, I agree completely. You know, that I wrote down, you know, where does conflict come from? To your point, you know, a lot of conflict is internal, and it's you're responding not necessarily to the situation that you're in, but you're responding to something else. You're responding to a past memory, a past limiting decision, limiting belief, something from your past you're associating it with, because the unconscious mind does that. The unconscious mind looks for, oh, I know what this is. This is like when that happened. And so a lot of times it's defending a situation that you're not even in. And you know, that's the challenge, is that things are showing up. And you know, to your point about, you know, the gaining weight, not a blanket statement, but yeah, that definitely a lot of psychology around gaining weight. It's protection. It's you're bigger, you're stronger, you know, there's a lot tied into that. And your unconscious mind just goes, okay, we can do that. We can get bigger, and you know, when they could change your habits, stuff like that. Outside of that, you know, talking about the tech industry, in my martial, I've also been in martial arts throughout my life, and one of my instructors used to say it's like playing chess at 100 miles an hour. And that's the tech industry. You know, it's high speed, low drag. You're always go, and you can do that for so long. You know, imagine playing, you know, speed chess. You could only play so many games of speed chess before you just kind of forget where you're at, and you forget which table you're at, et cetera, to use that analogy. So, you know, that's also why a lot of tech comes up, because it's high risk, high reward, and there's that balance. And now the reward is going down, so the risk becomes, you start looking at that. That aside, so but conflict, like I said, it's internal. It's something you have to look at, you know. But the reality is that the good news, I should say, is that conflict in the form of obstacles is actually a good thing, because an obstacle tells you you're going somewhere. You have a goal. You know, the Tao Te Ching, you know, they say, to paraphrase, they say the Tao is for those that have no preference. So you can go through life and like, okay, you know, okay, all right, okay, and just get bumped around. But I always use example that you know, if I'm trying to walk in a room and I'm trying to go from where I'm at to the door in a direct path, but there's furniture in the way, that's an obstacle. But that just tells me I'm going to the door. I have a direction. I have a goal. So then I have to go around it. And that sometimes people see that furniture, as for my example, as conflict. oh, there's this couch here. What am I going to do about this couch? And this couch, oh my God, and it's brown? Why is it brown? And what are they doing? And you get in those details and you get tied into that instead of just going around the couch. And that's what happens with a lot of conflict, is that it's like almost at the end of so conflict can lead to argument, not always, but it can. And at the end of an argument, you can say, what were we arguing about? You almost can't remember because you just wanted to quote unquote win this argument. It's not so much what it was about. And so you get stuck in those details. And that's the problem with conflict, is that it gets convoluted. And, going back again to your point, it's internal. You're bringing your baggage with it to this situation. A lot of the times, there's safety, security. There's those things that if someone's trying to do something to you that's not safe or take something from you monetarily, there's going to be conflict, and there should be. You should say no. Don't steal my social security number. Don't steal my numbers. Don't take this from me. But in general, in life, usually it's something that's triggering something inside of you.
Yeah, great share there, Jason. And when we come up with a word of the day, we really take it to task. We break it down, we separate it, different timing, different positioning. But conflict is something that you've arrived at that point. Now you're engaged. There were things that led up to that conflict. Most things didn't happen spontaneously. Most things happened over time, right? Because you ask yourself, I just did a simple thing I do every day, and now the person who's been around me all the time has found it to be something unusual. And you start to question them, but you don't realize it's been building for so long. Conflict is the arrival that, hey, now we're against each other, or now we have to get through each other to be back to being whole together. And it's being able to be sensitive to the little feedbacks you may get that aren't strong and you don't become aware of until someone confronts you and say, that's it, right? That's as far as we're going until something changes. And usually the something is you. And at the same time, it's your ability to respond in a proper way. Because the hardest thing to resolve conflict is to increase the conflict, right? If someone gets hot and heavy and you get hotter and heavier than them, it's going to escalate things. And not only that, you didn't take responsibility. If someone says, hey, can you pick up the coat you just dropped? And if you said, no problem, thank you for sharing that with me, which usually doesn't always happen. But it's like, hey, you never pick up your coats, and you start projecting. Don't blame me. You're just as bad as I am. And now both of you are bad. And now you got a double conflict. You got the one that you walked into, then you got the one you created. And now you got two steps that you got to come back from. And, I think the key to happiness is harmony. How do you go through life where you don't see conflict, you don't feel conflict? And if it does happen, it was an accident, right? I didn't know I dropped a coat. Sorry, right? And I could say in a nicer tone. That's typical, because you want to turn it off, right? You get dissonance and you want to stop it. You have rejection and you don't enjoy it. So you're acting it through as opposed to dealing with the moment. I was reading these meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and it's really cool to start your day. I took my walk with it. I'm on my fourth hour, and it's really easy listening. It involves complicated ideas and thoughts,
Right.
just very logical. This is this, and this can be this. And when you start to find that one of the bigger meanings of it is living in the now, dealing with the present. Too many people are carrying the past forward or taking the future into today because of fear or whatever. But again, I think to the point we're making, when something makes you feel a certain way, it has something to it that ignites you or makes you aware, because it's a trigger. When that person says that, I feel this. And not only that, they know I feel it. So when they say it, they know what the result will probably be. And, to our point too, that's an opportunity for expansion, for learning, for growth, for change. And so, you may not like the challenge that you're in front of, but when you're through it, you almost thank it, right? Because it's always better when it's over. And it's always better to say, well, and it makes you grateful, because until you run into obstacles and you stumble a little bit, are you grateful for the simple things? And sometimes people, whether it's technology, they overreach. They get beyond themselves, and that's what puts them in conflict. It's not a comfortable position. They're trying to do too much, too fast, with too little, and they're squeezing all the time to get it done. And in essence, where does it take them? And I think that's the most important thing. Everybody knows where they are. They don't always know where they're going to be. And is this a step to that? Or is this a realization that I'm dealing with a person that's always going to be this way? You know, conflict can change if change takes place, but if resistance or people get firm and stern and strict, well, there's not a lot of flexibility. And I think then the question is, what would you like me to do? What could I possibly do to make this right? Because you could be guessing and throwing darts out there in the dark, but until someone says, and sometimes what they'll tell you will surprise you, you know? And most of the time, you probably weren't aware of it. And if you become aware of it, maybe you choose not to do that. And I think the next step is, in the future, I'll be a little bit more thoughtful. I didn't know you were sensitive to that, because what's important to some people is unimportant to you and vice versa. But if you're going to deal with those people, let me know in advance if there's something or when, as soon as I do it, tell me. I'd love to hear it. Anyways, taking this to Beverley, what are your thoughts now, Beverley?
Oh, so many. I was writing a couple of things down, so many. The first one was the couch, when you mentioned taking things off the couch. One way to avoid that kind of conflict is to get rid of those statements. Okay. If you want a war, pick up that jacket from the couch. War. So that is, you could have said, all right, you pick up that jacket. It's exactly the same thing. Don't use a statement that is so direct and authoritative that the other person is going to resist and fight you. When you ask, could you please, and then make even a joke out of it because it's not so important, but it will be important if you see it every single day and that jacket sits there for weeks. Okay, that's what we're talking about, piling it up. It is, please, it's been bothering me. Could you please take that jacket, move it? It's driving me crazy. What you said, Jason, was it is about us. It is we. Okay. Our problems start with us, the way we hear it, the way we see it.
Right.
And when you direct it to someone else, boom, right? If you're frustrated with it and you say, pick that thing up, whatever it is, remember that's a you statement. You do it. Okay. Now, if you're in the army, I go back to that. It's like, yes, sir. Okay. And you'll do it. But if it happens to be your teenage kid, oh, yeah, right. Okay. So that's a completely different attitude that you have to adapt. It's an attitude where other people will hear it correctly and they want to help you to avoid that conflict. It's that simple. It's you have to relate to someone else. You can't just demand what your needs are. And you're going to get conflict with any kind of direct statement that tells someone what to do. And the only reason you will do it is if you start adding the stress that you have because you've seen that coat. You've said it 100 times. That kid did not move that coat, whatever it is. And then before you know it, the coat becomes a real war. He won't go to sleep. I'm using this kind of analogy, but the whole bottom line is your conflict is within you. Stop it. Listen. Okay. Listen to how you're talking to this person. Would you listen to yourself and do it? Absolutely not. So it's all really about us, isn't it? And that's really what I see in everything, in any conflict that we have to have resolution, and we should. You are the one that's not going to be able to sleep. You are the one that's going to be aggravated the next day. You are the one that is not going to be staying in the now. You see, I wrote that one down too, Dawn, because I think that's wonderful. And we have to be in the now each day. And so you resolve the conflict that you have, no matter what, in a respectable way for the other person to understand that you're a person too. And it may be a crazy person like myself. And I'm the first one to say, look, this fork is bothering me in the sink. I know I'm crazy, but could you please remove the fork for this crazy person? Okay. It will be taken so much better than you say, again, you left the fork in the sink. All those commands and use statements have got to go. And I just have to add, because we're moving so quickly, that I noticed Leslie Flowers. Hey. And I'm always thrilled when Leslie's here. Leslie is one of our biggest fans for sure, and I'm a real fan of everything that she does. Really, she's got a book out there, and and she's doing courses, and she's doing lives. And Leslie, you're all over the place. So if you don't know Leslie, check her out. And I just had to say that. Hi, Leslie.
Well, that's great. And I'll say hello to Leslie too. Leslie and me have been host of so many shows, probably at least 50. And actually, I believe Leslie did her first show with me, just like a lot of other people. But since then, Leslie has really taken a quality road that she helps so many people think and grow rich on Fridays, and another show which will come to me on Mondays, which is a audio event plus all her classes. I've learned so much from Leslie and appreciate her so much. And I know actually Harvey gives Leslie a lot of credit for his trajectory because she gave him some advice. So thank you for being here, Leslie. Always appreciate you. So Jason, your turn.
Yeah, but just to stay on the Leslie train for a second, and yeah, so I said, there's conflict, there's synergy, and definitely with synergy with Leslie. She had me on her audio program, had a great conversation. She had some other guests on there, and it was some other co-host, actually, I believe it was, and it was amazing. And so thank you for that. And it's good to see Leslie. She's out in the LinkedIn world. So the one thing I want to add, and we're rounding the bend here, getting close. The saying that I love is, do you want to be right or do you want peace? And just ask yourself that, that talking about mindset, just before you get into any conflict, something comes up and your response, you get that startle response like, oh, you did not just say that to me. Pause, just take that heartbeat, take that moment, take that minute of silence and say, do I want to be right or do I want peace? And you could be right and have peace, but it's how you approach it. And you could say, I'm going to approach this from a place of peace. So to everything that both of you were just saying, especially what Beverley was saying about, how you say it and how because saying, again, you left the fork in the sink. Are you looking for peace? No, you're looking for a fight. You're looking for, let's scrap. I got something to say about this. And you're frustrated, most likely. When we talked a lot about emotions show up. And when it comes to conflict, it's probably best to be more logical than emotional. And emotions do show up, and recognize them and say, why is this showing up? Why am I getting mad? Why does this make me sad? Maybe it's making you sad. And just you could ask yourself that. And I get it. This is a practice. This takes work. This isn't, I always say, come from a place of compassion. This is work. This is stuff that, all of us do this is who we are and what we do professionally too, and we talk about it. And trust me, I've known my wife for 30 years. And there are moments when I don't look for peace. There are moments when I'm like, nope, this is it. This is the one I've had it. This is the one I'm going to push back on. We're going to have a little conversation based around that. And I don't come from the place of loving this, but I usually do. I'm usually like, okay, let's figure this out, whatever. So do you want peace, or do you want, or do you want to be right?
Can I just
Please.
piggyback on that? Okay. Because I think that's so important. Okay. I know that expression. And if you don't like the peace, you can also say, or do you want to be happy? Okay. And what I've heard as the comeback for that is, well, do you want me to just take it and be a wuss? Okay. That, I think you have to get your head around that. You're not just taking it. What you're doing is you're just giving yourself a pause, and you can revisit that, as you said, Jason, with the fork in the sink. You can revisit that, but you don't have to continue to challenge.
Right.
And it's not only, do I want peace? It's, do I want to continue this battle over a fork? Okay. But you can revisit the conflict. So no, you're not a wuss. You are not. You do have to talk. You do have to have that conversation. And it's really about communication. And that's really what we have to do. And I'd like to also respond. You had a comment there about Leslie saying, should you not use the word should? Okay. Should also adds pressure. And we add pressure to ourselves with those shoulds. Okay. I'm thinking of Albert Ellis, who was a teacher of mine back in the day. He used to say, you don't should on yourself, okay? Which was really pressuring yourself. Who said, right? That comes from somewhere else. It doesn't come from you, the should. Was it your mother that said you should? Was it who knows, right? But the bottom line was, it wasn't you. But when you internalize that should, it is you. So give that should a thought. Should I really do it, or do I really want to do it? Or is that really sincere? Does it really come from me? So watch the word should, because should is just additional pressure and judging yourself. And you could be very dishonest when you judge yourself. Listen to your heart. Okay, not the words.
That's a great question, Leslie, and that's just as good an answer, Beverly. What it reminds me of is not looking for equal, being the better person, knowing what's important to someone else more than it is you. I mean, I've got tons of opinions, but there's very few that are really that important to me to get in a conflict with someone. So if it's like, okay, I'll do 70%, you do 30. I'm not into tit for tat. If I see something, I'll just put it away. I know in households you always have, well, I'll load and you unload. And meanwhile, that dishwasher could be loaded forever and no one's going to pull a dish. And I'm like, yeah, fair, I'll do it. If I could make someone happier, and I get nothing but the joy of making them happy, you're building goodwill, and you can kind of forestall a lot of conflict. I know growing up, my son would always say, whenever I had something I wanted him to do, or how I wanted to teach him, he would always say, tomato, tomato, potato, potato. It really doesn't mean much. And I started to understand and identify with him, because it's not being equal all the time, because some things you require that aren't fair to the other person. Mm-hmm. But if you did it enough for them, they feel obligated in a good way to say, okay, it's your turn. You chose the restaurant 6 times, now it's my turn. Or I know how important this is to you, and it really means very little to me, so have your way, and I'll do what I can to support you. You want to know you're on their side. If you're always competing with the people you're supposed to be in harmony with, you're not going to have as much benefit. And you don't know where someone just came from. You don't know what someone's dealing with. They're probably coming off of something, and you're just happen to be the next person they talk to. and they're uncomfortable, and it's easier to get to the root than the surface and say, what is it that you're feeling like this? I'm not used to hearing this, and all of a sudden you're considerate and you're on their side versus, well, hey, I did my share, you take care of your share. And that just extends it. I see Harvey came up with a huge comment. I'll just read it. An interesting conversation. To have conflict, you have to care. There have been plenty of people who have picked a fight with me over the years. I am not everyone's cup of tea. The conflicts I resolve always stem from listening with intent, but only with people who matter. Resolve what you can with the people who matter. Walk away from the fights that you don't need to have to be kind to unkind people. You're so right, Harvey, because I took the philosophy is they're a stranger when you met them, they're a stranger when you left them, right? There was nothing there to begin with, and there's nothing that's going to follow it. So why engage? And some people really are insecure, lack confidence, and they're overly sensitive, and it doesn't take much, but they play into everybody's game because they know they can make you angry, and when you don't respond in the way people expect you to, they start to think, well, what is it? Uh, Also, Harvey comes back with, yes, I'm a big fan, Leslie provided a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle for me. And that's why I mentioned it earlier. Harvey always relates to that little advice that might have been just off the top of Leslie's head, but it meant so much at the time. And that's the key: timing, positioning, situation. Some things people say and it means nothing. Other times they say that and it can really turn things in the wrong direction. Time has run away from me. I've been enjoying the show today, but I've realized I have a show with guest arriving in 10 minutes, so I better get to y'all soon. If you're into franchising or just into Harvey, and relating back to Beverley, I remember when Harvey did his first franchising show, and Beverley, well, why would I go to that show? I have no desire or interest in franchising. But when she went there, she found out how interesting the conversation with, and things that, whether it's women's empowerment, franchising, there's universal truths that come out of this. It just applies to a specific area. And that's where people can grow, is you get more worldly when you adopt more philosophies from different people. So moving it forward, we're at 52 minutes. Jason, I believe it's your turn. I'd love to hear what you have to say after 52 minutes.
It's a great conversation. Yes, as always, we can continue on. This could be a 2-hour conversation, and I love being here with folks that can do that. Two things I want to leave with. One, I'm going to have to apologize before I do it, but I want to get it out there just because I want to leave people with something. But I always say this one is not that. So I love the saying in a relationship, if you're both the same, one of you is redundant. So you're different people. There's going to be conversations, and that's about communication on how you get through those things that you're different about. If someone does something and you don't like it, it doesn't have to be conflict. It doesn't have to be an argument. It doesn't have to be a fight. It can just be a conversation. So being aware of that and just really checking in, like Beverley said from the very beginning, listen only to that person, but also listen inside. And what message are you sending yourself? The last thing I want to do, like I said, this is the one I apologize if it's not, and I'm going to go really fast to try to get this out there. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. In NLP, we have a thing with conflict called the perceptual positions, and that's how you see it. So if you have someone that you're struggling with, if you have someone that you're either preparing for a tough conversation or you've had a tough conversation that you can't let go, that you're really struggling with, real quick, there's 3 positions. Looking through your own eyes. So imagine this conversation with that other person in front of you, looking through your own eyes, see what you see, hear what you hear, feel what you felt. Then, here it gets a little funky, float out of your body, float into that other person's body, looking back at you, and see the conversation from their point of view. Then, float above both of you and look at the 2 of you talking and see what insights you can have about that conversation from that position. And that'll just help you get better insight into that conversation, either before you have it or after you've had it and you have something that you can't let go. And that's what we use to help people deal with conflict a lot of the times.
Yeah, that's terrific. So many tools and opportunities. And thank you, Jason, for sharing that. Beverly,
Yeah.
time
Oh,
to put
yes.
the frosting on the cake.
Well, it's almost time to wind down. And I have a couple of tips that I'd also like to live. First of all, listen, listen, listen. Don't react. Stop. Don't just jump in. Stop. And another thing also, it's all about strategy. It's not something that you cannot handle. Immediately when we are under stress, we're going to jump right in and try to explain. But if you say, I can handle this, and you just say that as a mantra, you just keep it and you do it every single day. This is my mantra. I can handle this. Okay. You can handle it all. And some days you may not be able to handle it, but what you say is, I will handle it tomorrow. So, in other words, you have control. You always have control. And you do have control over conflict. When you look at it as conflict, you feel, oh no, I'm going to lose. I lose every argument. I will not be able to get that raise. I will not be able to. Well, just look at what you're saying to yourself. You won't. Okay. But when you start saying, I have no conflict with this, I know my value, and you start understanding and you start appreciating yourself and you're listening to your inner voice. Listen, listen, listen. It's all internal. Okay. You listen to what you say to yourself, you listen to others. This is my best strategy that I have to leave for you. And it works all the time. And no, sometimes if it's a letter, say a letter from the government, you know they're going to charge you with taxes. Maybe you can't deal with that today. Don't open the envelope. It will conflict you big time if you're over the top. But open it tomorrow. Okay. Or it's going to pile up. Don't leave it. Same with the knife or fork in the sink. Talk about it. Think about it. How are you dealing with that stupid knife? Okay. Is it worth the argument, as Jason says? Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be right? Or do you want to revisit it? Well, revisit it. Okay. So you are in control. You're in control of conflict with others. You're in control of conflict with yourself as long as you listen to it. And if anyone wants to talk about that, reinventimpossible.com. I'm Beverley Glazer, and you can find me here on LinkedIn, and you can find me here on Tuesday. And by the way, if you'd like to come up and talk with us, please join us. All you have to do is send a DM to Don, and he'll talk to you. Don's easy. What a nice guy.
Well, thank you, Beverly. And it takes one to know one. And I think what people have to also appreciate, if it's always happened, it shouldn't surprise you when it happens again, right? When someone just is not very punctual and they prove themselves that way, when they're late, it's not a surprise. It's not a gift either. But you realize everybody's a little different, accepting people's differences instead of trying to change people. And I think that's where Beverly's comment, I'm not Beverly, but Leslie, with should. It's a lot easier to say, would you uh, help me out here? Or could you do this? Because then you're asking for a participation that's voluntary versus you should do this and you should do it now and you should do it this way. People don't like being told, especially when it could be asked. And the question is, why did you jump to tell instead of if just would have asked me, I would have done it. But now that it became like a heavy, heavy deal, I'm going to start feeling intimidated. Or you're setting a precedent because once I give into this, you'll always take advantage of me in the future. I mean, you get these crazy thoughts versus I'm going to take care of it right now. Because sometimes the time it takes to take care of something is less time and effort than fighting it. It means nothing to me. And it means a lot to you. I'm there. And you don't even have to tell people that because that's almost like a backhanded compliment. You're weak, can't handle it. I'll take care of it. No problem. It's like, don't do it. And then you get that whole thing. And then, when you've been with married for as long as I have and happily married for as long as I have, you know what keeps everybody happy. And part of the thing is keeping everybody happy. And as opposed, because you can't leave that person away. Wherever you are, they are, and they're going to be there tomorrow. And, there's always that saying, don't ever go to bed angry with the other person. Try to resolve it before you go to bed, because now you're not waking up with it. And hopefully you model things for people. And maybe they learn through modeling as opposed to direction. If you're nice, 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 there's a lot of guilt involved with taking advantage of a nice person. You might even stop that person from being nice. So there's selfishly unselfish opportunities that you can take advantage of that will pay you long-term dividends at short-term investments. So with that, I know we hit an hour. So happy to have Jason and Beverley with us, with this wonderful crowd of supporters. And I think Jason mentioned that too. Be with the people who are with you. I always say I only root for teams that root for me. So either before I go to a Bronco game, and what you put out there really does come back to you in many wonderful ways if you think it's true. So with that said, thank you again. Come back tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and tomorrow, let me think, we have Carl Dakin, who was on with Con actually previous to this. Harvey's following this in about 10 minutes. And then Thursday, we have Kelly and we have Dave. So another two cohorts who are just phenomenal. And then next Monday, we've got Carl and Con. So mix and match.
Nice.
With that said, and